All right. Looks like we're live again for episode 6. Can you
Yes.
can you believe it? It's
No.
amazing.
Absolutely wild.
Yeah. So, Natasha, why don't you give them a little background on who we got today? I think this is going to be a really fascinating one. Um,
Yes. So today we're talking to Aton. I hope I pronounced that correctly. CEO of Block Party. Block Party does so many amazing, interesting things for their clients and big clients across the board in music and other brands. Augmented reality, stickers for Insta stories, different types of content in the social space. I mean, these people, you go to their website and you're already inspired. They do such great work. And we're super, super excited to interview him today, get his feedback on how he feels about the industry and the space, dig in a little bit more, and just see what happens. So let's do it.
Absolutely. Let's bring him in.
Hi guys,
Way. All right.
Hello.
Thanks
thanks
so
for the warm
much
intro.
for joining us.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you're in, Brooklyn, and from New York, and that's where we first met. And I remember when we first met, I was so amazed at all of the work that you guys did. I had never seen a company really think about messaging apps the way that you guys did, and I think the first time I heard of you guys was, I believe it was the One Direction campaign
hmm
quite a while back. So, we've been following your work for quite some time. And, we here at Fast Forward really think that you're like one of the leading experts on messaging apps and really, social. So we're excited to have you on.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Give us
absolutely.
a rundown. Give us your take
Yeah,
on your own company.
sure. So it, it's crazy. It's almost 7 years since that One Direction campaign. Um, so for those of you that work in the music industry, I used to have a job that I would describe as kind of like A&R, but for startups and tech. So for a few years, I worked at a big ad agency at a division called IPG Media Lab, and I would basically scout startups and try to figure out which ones to connect with big brands like Coca-Cola and Miller, a long list of big companies. And it was a really fun gig, and I would just meet really brilliant, smart people. And my job was to just know where things are headed in technology and how marketers can use all these different platforms. During that period of time, I got really excited about all of these messaging apps around like 2012, 2013. And there was a period of time when I really felt kind of passionate that not enough attention was being paid to these apps, that more people were really like starting to gravitate to them than traditional messaging apps. And so for a while, that was really my mission, was to like write about this and try to get people to experiment with what they can do on platforms like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And there was a period of time also there are a number of other apps that have kind of fizzled since then. So while I was there, I built this project with One Direction on the messaging app Kick. And that was one of the first, kind of major messaging app campaigns in the music space. And ended up being pretty successful. And based on that and the work that I was doing, I went off and started Block Party, which for the first couple of years was like exclusively a chat marketing agency. And we were like, helping companies like Global Citizen, in their first year, their festival, we got them a big audience on some of the messaging apps, set up a live stream on one of the messaging apps. And we just kept working with a variety of clients to help figure out that space. And over time, we really branched out into more traditional social media, focusing a lot on stories as a format. And at this point, we're sort of a hybrid of a social media agency and a chat marketing agency. So we have a lot of clients where we'll do all of their social media like content, and this has been and it's pretty eclectic, from like celebrities to museums to politicians. It kind of runs the gamut. And, you know, and I think over time, you know, I'll let you guys ask questions, but I'm happy. I think in a certain way, Block Party's evolution has also reflected the evolution of marketing on chat apps and like the things that worked, but then there are things that didn't really work as well. And so we've had a lot of pivots over the years, which I'm happy to be totally candid about, because I actually think it's helpful for people to understand, you know, whenever you're in a space where it's sort of on the front edge of things, like there's going to be successes and failures, you know, and to me, that's part of the fun.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you kind of describe for, you know, the people that are tuning in, like what that evolution kind of was? Because that seems, you know, pretty fascinating. The fact that you kind of, you know, brought that up.
Yeah. So like when I was doing this in 2013 or 14, at that point, there was a period of a year or so where all the emphasis was on like helping celebrities and companies build really big audiences on. There were like 7 or 8 apps that were just gigantic. And it felt like there was all this opportunity that was just sort of like wide open for the taking. So, you know, at that point, it was sort of like you had Kik and you had Tango and Viber and WhatsApp and Messenger and a bunch of other smaller ones and Line in Japan. So, you know, a lot of artists were coming to us and saying, we really want to reach an audience in Japan, or we see that there's hundreds of millions of people on this app. We want to, you know, build an audience. So for a while, we were really like working closely with both those companies. Like we weren't on the payroll for any of the chat app companies. We were only hired by the artists, but we had great relationships and we were bringing them celebrities that were the ones who were interested in experimenting. You know, and it's interesting because we have clients that we got like over an audience of over 1 million followers on an app that just, you know, 3 years later completely fizzled. So for a while we were, you know, it was like a great success, but you know, like longer term, some of them didn't end up being great because the platforms disappeared. You know, I think going into like 2016, there was what happened was that there was a ton of hype around a very specific product of chatbots, to the point where I think chatbots were almost synonymous with messaging apps in people's minds for a period of time. And that's when we started, you know, building chatbots for people like Katy Perry, and a bunch of other organizations. And, you know, I think chatbots are, again, like sort of a prime example of there are ways in which they work, but ways in which, you know, artificial intelligence, as exciting as it is in potential, you know, wasn't always totally accessible to brands and to artists in a really like transformational way. So people ended up having to create really simple experiences for the most part, which, you know, I'll tell you, like, my analysis of what happened in a certain period of time is that, you know, I think around this period of 2014 to 2016, you really had a lot of competition between 2 products. One was chatbots and the other was stories. You know, and in my opinion, even though, you know, chatbots had their successes and they're still around, I kind of think that stories beat out chatbots. And certainly Facebook was really like placing bets on both, but then decided to really go all in on stories. And they basically sidelined chatbots, at least for the time being, you know, because I think that the AI wasn't quite there for it. And in some ways, stories acts as, it has this feeling of a one-to-one interaction, even though it's at scale. You know, the big challenge for messaging apps, like even when I talk about some of the less successful like industry experiments with chat apps, like the apps themselves have never waned, right? They've always been hugely popular. They continue to be like, so they're not going anywhere. It's really just been this period of time of figuring out, well, what can marketers actually do on these apps? What works, what doesn't? I kind of view stories as like having the feel of one-to-one messaging, but with a broadcast nature to it, which I think is what the times called for and could really pull off. And so in certain ways, I feel like stories beat out, chat bots, and we really actually became like stories experts and did a lot of writing on the shift from the newsfeed to stories. And so to me, that's part of the journey of all of this. But, please cut me off at any time because I feel like I'm rambling a bit. But
no, this is helpful because I think
this is what we want.
I think this is helpful because a lot of marketers, particularly let's say like some of the younger ones, kind of coming up and really trying to think about new ideas. I think the context is really important. Because from a lot of the other panels that we've had on, other marketers really coming to the table, and particularly from the brand side and from the music side, you're in quarantine right now. I mean, even we're taking a look at the first study here that I just wanted to bring up, which really kind of, kind of deviates the point a little bit, but is that App Annie's State of Mobile 2020's report actually found that over the last 3 years, messaging apps have just exploded, and particularly during quarantine, the use of messaging apps has, I think, tripled according to their recent data. So I'm really curious. I mean, I understand the history of where it was coming from, the kind of challenges and some of the successes or whatnot. But given the fact that social distancing is a thing, let's say live events aren't really going to come back, and the whole experiential marketing thing, from what we're hearing on our side, is just not going to be what it maybe once was before all of this coronavirus thing happened. Let's just start off this. Do you think messaging apps are going to just be much more important to kind of creating that one-to-one kind of feel like events kind of had? I feel
Well, it's a great question. So, I don't think it should be surprising to anyone that messaging apps have gotten more usage. When I look at my own life, I think most of that extra time has really been with family and friends. I can't say it's really ramped up my time engaging with brands when I think about traditional messaging apps like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. And I would guess that experience that I've had is similar to one that most people have had. At the same time, when I think of this period of coronavirus, I see a huge growth in video chat, especially. I think there's ways in which the messaging apps are ramping that up, right? So you see Facebook Messenger sort of emulating House Party, and I think you could make the case that even Zoom, in some ways, has aspects of being a messaging app. And I've seen, when you ask the specific question of will experiential and live events, move on to messaging apps or the digital space, to me, during the last 2 months, the big transformational things have been Instagram live stories, especially with two people together. That was a product that was sitting there kind of untapped for a long time, and all of a sudden exploded. And I see a lot of Zoom events, a lot of Zoom live events being streamed onto YouTube. Those are the kinds of things that we've been working on, fundraising. But I've even seen a lot of interesting Zoom private sort of events for fundraising. And, I do think that there are, I am really interested to see where those things go. I haven't seen people really get into driving revenue with any of these things yet, but I have seen them fundraise successfully, which is not far from generating revenue in a lot of ways.
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, from what we're hearing, I think that the revenue is people just aren't really there yet with any events or anything like that, particularly on the celebrity side. I just don't see, particularly given coronavirus, and a lot of the attention within the U.S. right now, I just don't see a lot of like influencers or artists or whoever like going out and trying to promote merch or albums right now.
Yeah, I think part of that is because it doesn't seem like a cool thing to do. When people are dying and going through heavy things, it makes a lot more sense to raise charity, and you don't want to be too self-serving. But at the same time, this could be a long-term thing where there aren't live shows for a while, and I think people will probably become more comfortable over time with more commercial uses of selling merch or selling tickets to virtual experiences. Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, Tasha, please, jump in. Hold on, Natasha. I think you may be on mute. You may be.
My bad.
Yeah, no worries.
We literally had this conversation on another panel because it was very much the, is it appropriate to ask for money or not when things like this are happening and it's not the right time. But on the other side of the coin, it's like, well, how much longer are musicians going to be willing to starve if they don't, if they basically are only making money off of their music? And how long are they willing to just be raising money for charities rather than trying to raise money for their own sustainability? But there's no good answer to that, honestly.
Yeah. And I'm super sympathetic to, I certainly, I have friends that are major label artists that are currently on unemployment, and I don't think that's uncommon right now. So like, I really do actually, I'm hopeful that some of these tools will evolve into ways for artists to make up for some of that revenue, because it's really hard. There is a really big group of artists that make most of their money on the road.
And look, I hear that. I mean, I've heard that across the board. Obviously, the global touring industry has taken a massive hit. I mean, brand dollars are kind of, tight right now. So I think from the creator side, at least, from us, like managing a lot of creators and artists and consulting for artists, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of artists wanting to use messaging apps, not to make like, all this money, but it's really for them more to use for like the super fans right now. Like, I'm thinking more of like the Patreons, and they're like, I think a lot of these artists, regardless if you're like, this B-level artist that can, fill out a 10,000, cap room or something like that, and you're not exactly at the arena level, but you're like in this like mid-tier level, you're signed to a label or whatever. I see a lot of them going to like the 100 to 1,000 fan theory, where it's like, okay, I know that everybody's like a little tight on money right now, like across the board. People are feeling, like their wallets are tight. There's budgets being cut. There's, salaries being cut. But like, how can I get like a group of like 1,000 of these people to pay $100 a month? And what kind of content do I need? And I just feel like I'm hearing, and I just feel like I'm hearing from my side that they're all looking at messaging apps as like, how can I get fans to want to pay for that one-to-one interaction? Because I feel like there would be a lot of like, let's take like an artist like Mario, for example, like really well accredited, has done many arena tours for, B2K and like the Millennium Tour, whatever. And I feel like he's got a big enough fan base where he could get 1,000 fans to be like, hey, like, chat with me on, WhatsApp or whatever, and it costs you $15 a month or something like that, and whatever. I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts on that, because that's been something that we've been
think
hearing.
we will see more and more of that, and I think that artists that are really interested in experimenting with that now, it should be possible. There isn't a ton of that going on here. There's definitely been more of those sort of like experiments in subscription / exclusive access on messaging apps in Asia. And I think that as WhatsApp sort of ramps up also its, payment features, it'll be interesting to see if things like that evolve. I think theoretically that messaging apps are the right place for a lot of that type of interaction, or even like, access in like group settings where, it's like, even the way Facebook Messenger, is now with these rooms allowing, there's no reason an artist couldn't go into a room with like a capped, thing of 20 people or something like that. And it's actually exciting to hear that's what you're hearing, that people are really talking about that. Because, totally candidly, I haven't gotten a ton of people. Well, I don't know. I've had some interesting conversations with music industry people and touring industry, definitely thinking like, what can we do? What's the right, emerging opportunities to make up for lost revenue? Has anyone been doing it, or they're more just sort of talking about it?
I mean, let's take a look at. I think there's two people to mind that come to mind.
Yeah.
This guy Leroy, who manages. Who do they manage? Lion Babe. They did that whole Instagram tour where it was like they toured in Brazil and they toured in Asia and all these different places, but they literally did it virtually. And Erica Badu did an amazing, live stream, and we actually had the company that did the back end for the live stream on the show. And I think there is a pretty big consensus that like the only way that fans are really gonna feel like paying $15 for a ticket or any sort of money, given the fact that there's been so much free content across the board, is pretty much that like they need to somehow have a conversation with that artist and kind of be brought into their world and feel like they're actually getting like that one-to-one response, because then it becomes like a value proposition of like, if I love Rihanna or I love Mario or any of these artists, like I would totally think about paying $20 to like ask them a question about like how did they write this song, or maybe like I can like come into the concert and like like tell them something about how the songs affected me or something like that, like, so that's the kind of stuff that we're hearing, at least on our side.
Mhm.
But I think that goes well into Natasha's kind of next cue that she was looking at as well.
Yeah, so this kind of leans more on the brand marketing side of things, but like obviously to gain retention and offer a personalized conversation, it thrives on data, and you have to create some sort of format where it can be individual content. So can you give us some insights on, how important it is for consumers to feel like these messages coming from brands and celebrities or artists feel personalized? How is the data being used? How do you feel like it can still be personalized without it being so one-to-one? I mean, I can't imagine 1,000 people like texting, an artist or a brand and them being able to respond. It just seems like kind of crazy. So from that perspective, like how important is the data? How important is the structure to be able to implement something like this?
I think data is always important, for any marketing these days. And I've seen a really wide range of personalization, customization. I think people are kind of segmenting a lot of their messaging stuff the same way they might for email lists, and sort of breaking it out into different categories based on what people are interested, where they live. And so you want to try to analyze your audience in that way and give them the information that they actually want. In terms of the messaging itself and customizing it, that sort of ladders up to that conversation about artificial intelligence. And so, I've certainly used some chatbots that can have mind-blowing conversations with me that feel completely tailored to me, and they feel like I'm talking to a human. But there are very few of those chatbots out there, and that type of technology isn't widely available to artists or even to brands, really, right? So you have big companies like Amazon and Microsoft working really hard on making that type of AI accessible to to brands and to smaller companies, but it's not there yet. Not in a mass way where, any artist can make a fan feel like, they're talking to them specifically. And truthfully, I have concerns about a lot of the sort of messaging approach that I've seen celebrities use with some of the tools that are out there, because often they're kind of pitching it to fans. It's like, this is going to feel personalized and this is going to feel like we're best buds. And it almost never does. In fact, that, when I first clients that I have that are celebrities, I really counsel them to be quite careful to not like run a risk of alienating fans or disappointing them. And there's sort of this push and pull, right? Because like the open rates are going to be great, right? Like if you're a celebrity and you go out to your fans and you say, here's my number, hit me up here. Like a lot of them are going to do it, and a lot of them are going to open the messages when you do send them. And that's the good part, right? And I think that's the opportunity, and that's why it's awesome. But, I kind of like to be upfront with people about what they're actually going to get, because I don't know. I mean, there's nothing worse than like, a fan who, you're as an artist, your credibility should come, above everything, right? So the trust with your fans, I think, should be more important than anything else. So it's good to be careful. The other thing I'll mention is like, when I look at messaging, there's sort of, I divide the opportunity into two sides. One is the side that we're talking about, which is like, you have a channel and people feel they can message you. The other side of it is, people are messaging with their friends on these apps all day long. How can I create things that add to that conversation without them actually talking to me? And that's where, I feel like the side of how can I enter the conversation is a little bit more evolved in what you can do, right? So like creating all these fun gift stickers, creating augmented reality, those are sort of like proven, they're fully worked out. People love them. We have clients that have gotten billions of views of their gift stickers that people use in stories and use in conversation. So that stuff is like inexpensive and it's fun and it's awesome, and fans will definitely use it all the time. The other side of like, hey, I'm Rihanna, you can talk to me now. Like that's way harder to pull off. And so, I think it's good that people are experimenting, and I honestly think it'll get there eventually, but it might take time.
Yeah,
No,
fair enough.
and I'll say like your point on like, hey, here's my number, hit me up. I have seen so many artists, particularly on the music side. I think a lot of them are using Ryan Leslie's
Community?
Yeah, it's like Community or Superphone or something like that.
Okay.
And I mean, I've gotten the text messages. Some of them, like I hear you on the open rate. I don't think there's one that I personally haven't opened. I think I'm like subscribed to like Big Sean and a couple other people, and they send you a text message about new music. But definitely fascinating to kind of hear that. I am curious though, and as I kind of look down the pieces of notes, can you kind of go back to your point a little bit just about like outside of the U.S., right? Like where messaging apps are just absolutely huge in Asia, India, and Latin America. How are you counseling clients and brands, whether they're artists, brands, celebrities, whoever, on trying to reach consumers in these like major emerging territories? And do you think that because of the massive use of messaging apps in these territories that is, I think they're much bigger than the U.S., do you think that's more important that they use the messaging apps rather than like Instagram or kind of a social strategy? Or do you think they kind of need to go hand in hand?
I think there are apps that are big globally, and then there are apps that are big regionally. I think that if WhatsApp can become a platform that's truly useful for marketing, for artists, and it could be now, truthfully, but though I don't see many using it. I think I have found that when it's regional, a lot of celebrities can easily lose interest in the app, truthfully, and I don't say that in a way to kind of insult them. I think there is a level on which people are most excited about using platforms that they use every day themselves, and so it can be hard, to stick with things when you're sort of using it, knowing that it's popular somewhere else, but you don't, personally use it.
Oh no. He may be paused for a second. He'll come back.
Yeah.
Oh, did you?
Did we get you back? Hold on.
I think we'll message him right now. Let's see.
It'll come back. It always just takes a moment. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I definitely hear Eitan's point here. Oh, he's back. Oh, good.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
My Wi-Fi has actually been pretty shitty the last week.
Yeah, no worries. Continue, please.
It's funny because on my side, I still see myself like we're still here, but are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. You have to tell me where I cut off because I don't know.
Oh yeah. You were kind of talking about some of the points around the benefits and kind of like of looking at the regional versus the larger scale apps, and people wanting to use apps that they kind of use every day in their own lives.
Yeah.
That's one point.
Yeah. I mean, you probably gathered that I'm very candid about like what works and doesn't work. I'm not the kind of person that just only talks about the successes and what works. Like I have found historically that it can be difficult for celebrities to stick with at like certain platforms that are popular regionally if they don't use them themselves, even when they build huge audiences. Like so while I do think that that's a good strategy, and that people should do that, there's a part of me that's kind of hoping that WhatsApp will be, like an app that artists and celebrities, end up gravitating towards, knowing that they can really, reach people globally. But, I do think there are, yes, I think, an artist that takes it upon themselves to build a presence on WeChat in order to reach an audience there, that's great. And I think it's really smart. But at the same time, people, there are a lot of platforms. And the truth is that an artist or their team sometimes feel like they can barely still post on Snapchat or something like that at this point, right? So it's like on a totally practical level, like, I haven't seen as much demand from celebrities to grow an audience on some of those platforms now compared to a couple of years ago when there was like, I think I would describe it as more intense interest in experimenting. But, that doesn't mean that I counsel like to not do it. I think I do counsel like, think about whether you're willing to make a long-term investment and whether you have the time and the resources to like stick with it. Because I have seen, apps like Line in Japan, and I've seen celebrities get tens of millions of followers, there and just like kind of lose interest when the app didn't become popular here like they thought maybe it would, or it's a pretty common thing. So
It almost seems like every other social platform where you really have to dedicate the time and the content to it, and it seems like you're pretty much advising that this can't just be a like let's do it once and it'll work forever sort of thing. Like this needs to be something that you need to work at and build
And step
consistently.
and repeat doesn't apply very much on a global perspective when it comes to behaviors and kind of likability for
Yeah.
certain apps, it seems.
I mean, look, there is a level on which you can repackage the same basic content for a lot of these platforms with some customization or even not.
Right.
But, you know, I think because people have gotten really used to like, okay, you know, I have this plugin that allows me to push my Insta stories to Facebook stories, for example, right? Like if you had an ability to push from, you know, the app that you use every day out to all these other places globally, like everyone would do it in a second. But those things don't really exist. So all of a sudden it like is a bigger lift to do it. And I think people have a tendency to get excited and then to lose interest sometimes. And it's natural, you know, again, this isn't me talking shit. It's just me saying like, you should ask yourself, like, what would success actually mean to me on this platform? And like, how many people would I need to have here in order to feel that it's worth my time to stick with it? Or does it need to like, you know, because otherwise it's very easy to kind of be like, this is the new hot thing. Like, let's just do it. You know, but without really thinking through how you'll feel about that in a few months from now.
So
Right.
I want to go back to this because a lot of the case studies that I've read of yours, I think when you sent me a case study a while back, it's amazing to see like just how many sales a lot of your chat campaigns have actually driven, particularly on the record side, right? Like selling records is hard. I think everybody knows that, and then like you know a lot of I think it's a One Direction one or maybe the Katy Perry one.
Which was 2013. A lot the music industry has changed.
Yeah, definitely
like people definitely bought more then.
I will say though, like, do you feel like there's an opportunity within like chat apps that maybe doesn't exist within social yet to really drive commerce in a way that, you know, maybe like posting a photo of Instagram of a merch collab with a brand and an artist or a brand and an influencer maybe just doesn't have? Like, do you feel that there's just different opportunities of commerce the same way that there's a lot of in-app purchases within like games right now? Like, there could be that for messaging apps?
I think that the potential is really there. I think it's realized in other markets, but less in the US, simply because, you know, not everyone is linking their credit card to Messenger the way they are on WeChat, you know, if they're in China. You know, that's why I'm kind of like, I think of WhatsApp as a much stronger platform than Messenger. In that I think like people just spend way more time on it, and I think it's a more integral part of people's lives than Facebook Messenger. I think there's a lot more casual usage of Facebook Messenger. So as WhatsApp really ramps up its payment, you know, ability, if everyone really does start putting their credit card info in there, I think there could be a lot of potential to monetize for brands and artists through WhatsApp, and I'm like a little bit more bullish on that long term than I am on Facebook Messenger.
Very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So, you know, chatbots obviously are getting a lot more sophisticated, and they're able to replicate human conversations. We recently saw Google's duplex technology can call and book appointments for you, even adding like human conversation ticks like which I think is super creepy, but that's cool, I guess. So it's obviously not just simple code anymore, and a lot of, you know, artificial intelligence that's very advanced is being thrown into that way to create conversions. Do you see brands taking advantage of this more in the future and kind of creating more of that kind of like personal shopping experience through this type of technology in the future with chatbots, or kind of where do you see that going?
Yeah, I do. I think from the brand perspective, you have to keep in mind that brands are going to be extremely cautious and with AI, and rightfully so. Like, there have been these sort of like, like I think that Microsoft, their Tay chatbot was sort of like the most famous example of like a huge disaster. And I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was like a chatbot that people were able to fuck with it and train it to basically be like a neo-Nazi sympathizer. And this was like right in the middle of all the chatbot hype, and it's like the quintessential like, okay, like this thing isn't going to happen right now.
That sucks. I mean, there's always the good and bad side of technology.
But like honestly, like the few times I've used a super advanced, chatbot, like it's amazing what people can do with them. And and I have read that there is like an increase in chatbot usage, and I think ultimately during quarantine, like it can sort of like be a nice diversion when people are feeling lonely, and that's why it has been popular. And there have been these really interesting experiments, especially in Asia with these advanced chatbots that people talk to all the time. I'd actually be really surprised if that didn't become more prevalent eventually, and I'd be surprised if those kinds of things weren't incorporated into platforms like Alexa. I'd be surprised if they weren't married with video technology. Like I think all these things are going to happen, and like you said, like they will be creepy, and then there'll be this period of time where we grapple with like, okay, this is like creepy, but I kind of am having a lot of fun. Is this okay? Is it not okay? And like eventually we'll just get used to it, and it'll be like the new normal, for better or for worse, because that's how it always goes. Right. So like, even as I tell you about like all these things that like didn't go well for the chatbot industry and this and that, like I think it will go well eventually. I think these things like are happening. I think artificial intelligence is, it's evolving and it'll get there. But part of my point to you is that like brands, celebrities, they're going to have to be careful, right? They're going to have to make sure that there's like no way that this thing is going to, like when you get into real AI, it's like, this is like a thing that is learning, right? Yeah. Like any chatbot that you see now that a celebrity is using, it's a simple decision tree. It has like very little artificial intelligence, as opposed to these other things that are like, it's like these things are like learning. They're learning about the end of the more evolved AI, like chatbots. They're like, when it talks to you, it learns about you. Like, it learns, so once you go into that, like the things that are possible are amazing, but it also can like, I think it has to be to a point where it's like definitely not going to go haywire. Totally. And I think that brands are going to want to see that and like take no chances. But like I still think it'll happen. I think that like we will see more of those. I've stopped prognosticating on like exactly when or how long, because like I just don't fucking know. No one does.
Right. Well, and it makes me wonder for companies like Stitch Fix or, those types of companies where you get a personal stylist and they learn about your interests, your likes, your dislikes, your needs in fashion and all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine that eventually transforming into a very advanced AI that has, good style metrics, understanding of color theory, all of these things. And on top of that, they're learning preferences from this person, being very likable, and creating this like very strange AI relationship with a human while helping them create conversions of sales with fashion. I mean, that feels like the next step. Granted, a lot of people will lose their jobs with that, but like that's just the evolution of technology at the end of the day anyways, half the time.
Yeah, and I think a company like Stitch Fix is a great example of a company that would be like poised to be maybe earlier in being able to use this stuff. It's like customer service has generally benefited the most from a lot of these tools. Anytime where you're able to just sort of like help people with like very specific, like a lane of tasks, like I think, and with purchase, I think it can be really effective. it's more of this idea of like what we call like generalized artificial intelligence, where it's like trickier to pull off.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're starting to get a couple questions in here from the LinkedIn audience, and I just kind of want to rattle a couple of them off because I think one of them's so one of them, this music manager from Los Angeles, apparently he's got a couple acts. He's asking, what brands and what sectors do you see messaging apps kind of collaborating with the best? So I'm assuming he's pretty much saying that, are there certain verticals or sectors that you think can perform best with messaging app marketing within their campaigns?
And we're talking about more like traditional brand. Is the idea here sort of like how can we get sponsorship?
Yeah, I think the idea is just like, are there any like verticals of brands, whether it be like apparel or are messaging apps working just better with artists, or like what kind of verticals, I guess, are you seeing the best use of messaging apps and like the best like conversion, or I guess success, or however the success is deemed. Because I guess I just really want to figure out what kind of lanes work best with message app marketing. Do we lose Aiden
He
again?
might be frozen again. I'll let him know.
All right, hold on. It's all good. The quarantine lifestyle is still very real.
What can you do?
Oh,
we're back. Awesome.
Amazing. Sorry about that. Cool.
Can you hear us? Maybe.
I think, yeah, you should.
Sorry,
yeah,
guys.
No worries. Yeah, they were just pretty much asking. Oh,
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen a lot of like. Can you hear me, or you're?
Oh no. Yeah, now you're good.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. I've definitely seen a lot of. I've seen a lot of alcohol companies sort of, being pretty active in this space. Definitely media companies and publishers, major newspapers and TV. Yeah, I think a lot of like, I generally, more than even like industry, I think it's good to look out for the companies that just like to be innovative and like kind of like make a splash doing stuff first. Because even within certain industries, there are companies that are really excel at that, and so I would kind of like, those are the companies that we often work with, and I would kind of advocate for researching that more than anything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then we have one more question here. Do you recommend a specific genre start taking a look at message app marketing in preparation for tours or album releases from your experience? And this is coming from a record label music marketing professional.
Do I think certain genres like do best with it? Is that what you're saying? Theoretically, I think it should work for most genres. I feel like it's been most active in pop and hip hop, from what I've seen, and I could definitely see that, like, indie rock listeners might be like a little bit less open to some of the messaging, if I had to guess. But I'm not citing any data for that, so I don't want to assume. Yeah, I don't know. From just like from anecdotally based on conversations I've had, it does feel like pop and hip hop audiences have been very like receptive, and the open rates that I hear from people have been especially strong in that space.
I have a question personally. So
Yeah.
we've talked about several different, chatbots and all that stuff. Do you have a favorite or top two that you think are like the most premier that are best served for brands and musicians, or does that vary based on industry that you think can really kind of make the most impact on experience? Like, is WhatsApp the best for messaging apps, or would you say Facebook Messenger really like does a great job to create good conversation, conversions, experiences, whatever? What have you seen is the most successful?
Sure. Well, my favorite like chat bot of all time is called Mitsuku. Um, and you can that is like the one that is sort of like the most advanced AI. Like you can have a conversation with it, and most of the time it will feel like you're talking to a person who will learn about you, and say things that like feel like a funny like Mitsuku is a chatbot that's been built over many years, and has like a very defined like sassy personality, pretty funny, and to me is sort of like the example of what's possible and where things are headed. And whenever I play around with that chatbot, which I haven't in a while, I'm always like, wow, it'd be so interesting, if brands could kind of like plug into this type of framework, what could be possible. In terms of in terms of the major messaging apps, like, do I have a personal favorite? Not really. Like at this point, I would say I probably use WhatsApp the most, but really just like primarily to talk to family. And I used to not be a fan of WhatsApp for a long time because it has so fewer things that you can do on it compared to a lot of the other messaging apps. So, like I said, from a marketing perspective, if you're trying to reach people in the US, I think that, Messenger probably is what people feel has the best intersection of like, it's easy to build something, and to reach an audience with it. Personally, I'm more excited about WhatsApp. And we've been, building more experiences for WhatsApp, and long term, that's the one that I'm most excited about.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate you for kind of giving your professional insight. I feel like you're so involved in it. So I'm going to check out Mitsuku because that seems so cool and different. I'd never heard of it. So very interesting. I guess, to wrap, would love your final take, your 3 predictions on where you see this industry going post COVID-19 and beyond. Maybe if you unfreeze, we'll see. I think we'll get him in a second, but yes, I think we're gonna.
Oh,
there you go. You got it. Did you hear my question?
Sorry, I feel terrible.
No. It's don't worry. Trust me. It happened to me last week where I just kept going in and out.
You had to leave the chat all the time. But did you hear my question for that last one?
I didn't.
That's okay. 3 predictions, final takes on where you see the chatbot industry or any of the other things that you guys usually work on going after post COVID-19.
Sure. I do think that live streaming is going to like be more than a fad in terms of like, I think that some of what's happened in the last couple of months, I expect that it will have a lasting impact. And I do expect people to experiment with using it to drive revenue. And like we said earlier, to like become more comfortable experimenting with a commercial side of it. So yeah, I think there are all kinds of creative possibilities, and it's been really cool to just see people experimenting with all these live table reads for TV shows, and yeah, so that's one thing. I do think like I've been saying, like I think WhatsApp will eventually become a big one, and I think AI will eventually become
Don't worry,
Give it
we're
a
gonna
second.
get back to this WhatsApp prediction. I
We'll
mean, I
give it
really
a
got to
second.
say that the WhatsApp thing is fascinating because you
Yeah,
don't
it is.
hear that as a platform from like brands to be like, "Yo, let's get on WhatsApp." It's not
Literally
like
never.
that's like not like the top of their list. Everybody wants to be on TikTok, and obviously we had that TikTok panel, whatever. Hey, sorry, we just
No, it's cool. Maybe I don't know where I cut off, but maybe we should.
no, you're going back on your WhatsApp prediction and the bullishness that you felt there.
Yeah, yeah. I do think we're also like I do think augmented reality is another area that will become more and more an interesting part of messaging. We've been experimenting with like sort of building like 3D photorealistic models of celebrities, and we did a fun experiment for the chain smokers with that, and to me that's also interesting because there's ways in which I think you can create sort of like, oh, what does a performance look like if it's like on your desk or through augmented realities. So that's another interesting area I think that people can and will explore over time. And yeah, I think also just like the blurring of lines between like all of these things, like what is a messaging app, what is social media, like it all eventually sort of like coalesces into one space in a lot of ways, and over time it's like hard to even know which is which, and in some ways it doesn't matter. It's just sort of like it
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Love it.
this has been really insightful. I mean, I was just telling Natasha, you just don't hear a lot of artists or brands, specifically the ones that I work with. I'm sure that others that are like, hey, like, we need to get on WhatsApp, like, immediately. Everybody's so concerned about TikTok and everything
Yeah, and
else.
I'm not
But
saying that you should get on it immediately necessarily. I'm just saying I think there's a lot of potential there. But there's plenty of reason to be excited about TikTok.
oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Definitely is. But I think
We know that.
TikTok is like makes me the happiest of all social platforms during all the craziness. It's a little bit more of like a pure joy to it that like,
Yeah.
whereas everything else feels very heavy in comparison. So,
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but I'm all for TikTok excitement these days.
No, yeah, I mean, definitely. I think it's just great to hear that, like WhatsApp is a place that brands need to recognize that there is potential. And, so if there are a lot of brand marketers on here right now, so where can they reach you? Where can they contact you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah. So the company is Block Party, and the website is weareblockparty.com. And you can email me at Eytan, which is EYTAN, at weareblockparty.com.
Great. Yeah, we'll make sure we put that in the YouTube
recap.
In the YouTube recap and everything. Well, Eytan, thank you so much for coming by and really kind of giving us a breakdown on how messaging apps have a lot of potential and just really the areas that are going to be exciting to see in the future. So.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. All right, Natasha, another one in the books.
We did it. This was good.
And for everybody who's wondering, obviously we postponed our last week's panel in observance of Blackout Tuesday. Fast forward and austere, and we gave a joint donation to it's not Color of Changes, it's the blanket, NAACP. So just wanted to mention that. So we were rescheduling for I believe this coming week. Guys are gonna get a double header.
Yep.
You guys are gonna get the venue one plus I think the YouTube monetization one.
Yes. So next week, Tuesday and Thursday, catch us here doing this again, bringing you all the goods. We're really excited. I mean, it'll be a truly packed week, but I think there's so much exciting stuff to talk about again in our second round for record labels and was it record labels or venues? I can't remember now, actually.
Oh yeah, it's venues.
The venues.
This
Part
venue
2.
one is gonna be huge. We have
Yeah.
got the co-founder of Le Poisson Rouge, which is an
Yes.
amazing venue in New York City. We've got a talent buyer. We've got the CRO of bands in town, and we've got the
Yes.
head of artist relations from the National Independent Venue Association, which recently sent a letter to Congress asking President Trump for a bailout or financial assistance to the independent venue community. So
Yep.
that's going to be really exciting. Like I said, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to Fast Forward. This has been an amazing. I just want to send another thank you to Eitan. I gotta check out this Masuku thing.
Yeah.
like,
what I'm doing
like,
right after this.
like I just don't know what it is, but it sounds so cool that I'm like,
I
I
want to have
gotta.
a sassy AI conversation. That's what I
Yeah,
want.
but like I said, I think takeaway is this is like brands take a look at WhatsApp. You know,
Yeah.
it seems to never be in anybody's mind,
Yeah.
and I think Eitan had a great point here. It's that it's not necessarily something that's like a must, but just understand the high volume and potential there,
Yeah.
and you know since there's not a lot of people doing it, I feel like there's a lot of room for experimentation and just opportunities. So yeah, thank you again so much, everybody. You can follow us. Was it
Let's fast forward.
Yeah, let's fast forward on Instagram, and
Right
then obviously
there.
yeah, and you can go and check us out. Fast forward on the LinkedIn newsletter. We just dropped an amazing interview with the CMO of PepsiCo Beverages. If anybody wants to go check that out, we're gonna look to try and have him on the show at some point. So that conversation's happening. But yeah, everybody,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for tuning in, Natasha. Thank you again. Everybody, continue to
Thank
stay
you.
safe, and we
Yes.
will see you next week next week.
Absolutely.
So, all right, guys, thank you so much.
Bye.